Hello, I'm Simon Delaney. Welcome to the Scale Files. This video is aimed at giving you practical advice on how to research and create scale effects which can be incorporated in your scale model. We take you on a tour of the Shuttleworth Collection in England and look in detail at one of the finest collections of vintage aircraft in the world. One of our agents was also assigned to report from the 1998 La Ferté show in France. His mission was to film some of the largest and most impressive radio-controlled scale models ever flown. And in the workshop I'll be showing you a host of examples of scale, detail and finishing. There are various ways to find the information for the extra details you wish to add to your scale model, either from photographing a subject in its full-size form or from aircraft books and videos which are widely available. Also by buying one of the many plastic aircraft kits which are usually an excellent source of information on camouflage and markings and give you the opportunity to examine the model in 3D. However, the ultimate way to research your chosen subject is to view one in a museum or at an airshow. I visited Old Warden Airfield in Bedfordshire, England to look around the world famous Shuttleworth Collection. The Shuttleworth Collection features a unique collection of historic airplanes that, unlike many museums around the world, are still airworthy. The collection was started by Richard Shuttleworth, who in the years leading up to World War II had the foresight to start collecting these machines at a time when many were being scrapped or discarded. He was very enthusiastic and amassed a wide variety of cars, aeroplanes and other machinery in various states of disrepair. Tragically, Richard Shuttleworth was killed in a flying accident during World War II while flying a ferry battle with the RAF. His mother set up the Shuttleworth Trust so that his collection could become a memorial to him, encapsulating all that he loved. Here are three classic British aircraft: the Hawker Hind, Gloucester Gladiator and Vickers Supermarine Spitfire. This particular superb example is a Mk.V version which has clipped wings, 20mm cannons and machine guns in each wing, and was built in 1942. It was procured from Loughborough University where it was being used as a test airframe. Following extensive restoration at Shuttleworth, it was used in the film The Battle of Britain, and afterwards it was transferred to RAF Duxford where volunteers restored it to its current condition. One of the attractions of scale modelling is the opportunity to build your all-time favourite aircraft, and the Spitfire is one such aeroplane. The Vickers Supermarine Spitfire is rightly listed as one of the classic aircraft in aviation history. Its elegant lines were immediately distinguishable to friend or foe, and the later Griffon-engined variant served with the RAF until the mid-1950s. Marrying the engineering work of R.J. Mitchell and his team at Supermarine and the Rolls-Royce Merlin power plant, the Spitfire, although restrained by its short range, had a wing design which could be supplied with a combination of armaments particular to its role. high altitude reconnaissance, ground attack, machine gun or cannon armed, the Spitfire fought in all theatres during World War II and almost doubled its weight and power between the original and final marks. Okay, let's go and have a close-up look at some of the detail on this superb aeroplane. Things you want to be looking at when you're building your aeroplane are the subtle details. Things like this recoil unit, the shape of the shroud that covers the cannon, yellow identification markings along the leading edge, and a neat trick with any aeroplane that's got machine gun muzzles and ports that are set into the leading edge is you can scallop away the balsa and put a cover over here, and when you shrink it down, it'll give this rather nice effect. When you get a chance to have a close look at an aeroplane, note the construction. On the aileron, the leading edge comes out here and stands well off the main part of the skin. And also, on the fuselage, this large wing fairing stands off the main fuselage skin, as does this panel here and the panel below it. Also, you can notice this canopy rail, which you can cut into the fuselage, use a bit of plastic strip here, just to break up the shape of the fuselage. Also, the aerial mast is a very important part in any World War II fighter. If you've got it, the aeroplane just looks that little bit more special than those who don't bother to put the aerial on. The plane almost looks naked without it. Canopy detail as well, and this part of the framing is an important feature. And when you look at the whole aeroplane, you can see how it's all made up of panels that fit over each other. They're not smooth, but they're an integral part that make up the whole aeroplane. One piece of detail that's often missed off on early Mark Spitfires are these strengthening pieces that were fitted over the wheel wells, but they really add detail, and also the cannon bulge here really add to the overall look of the aeroplane and just busy it up that little bit. Also notice the wing walkway line and the cannon and machine gun arming points, which you can draw out in the panels and just break the wing up that bit more. Turning our attention to the tail of the Spitfire, there's loads of detail that we can add to make our scale model just that little bit better. Items such as the trims, the actuating mechanism and this fairing, there's the rib tape stitching on the elevators, the cutouts on the hinges, and this rather nice fairing that runs around onto the tailplane. These are all items which, taken with a little bit of care, you can make up and really make the aeroplane look that bit different. You can make these up from balsa, maybe some card, litho plate. Trim tabs can easily be cut out from the final construction and then glued back on with a little bit of sanding on either side. It just breaks up the tailplane nicely. Actuating mechanisms like this one on the trim can be made from scrap balsa, ply, and cutouts for the hinges and these little holes here really will add to make the tail of your aircraft look that bit better. You can mould these little navigation and formation lamps as well, and there's a rather beefy rudder horn on the side here, which is also of interest. Don't forget, of course, to get your national markings to be the right size and shape and the right colour. This isn't red, it's a very deep kind of browny brick red colour, and it's important to get these of the right size and shape. And also this sky type S colour here used on British aircraft is an unusual combination of colours, but it's worth mixing the paint just to get it absolutely right. After all the time you spent studying the aircraft and producing all the details, don't forget to make sure you've got the right overall effect. Paint mixed the right colours, faded the right amount, position and size the national markings correct, and a nice bit of weathering and tone to make your airplane an absolute masterpiece. When great effort has been put into building a model, whether it's built from scratch or from a kit, there can be nothing more rewarding than adding your own detailing to finish the model, which breathes life into it, as well as a hint of individuality. Once your model has been completed, there is also the opportunity of entering competitions at varying levels. Many of us are, however, content to enjoy our models at our local club sites, and many beautiful models are never seen in public. A visit to a show gives you the benefit of being able to look at models close up and talk to the people who built them, finding out various techniques and methods they have employed to get a more realistic finish on their chosen subject. Discussions about types of paints, Finishing processes, detail construction and materials that have been used, or how weathering has been applied, can all be pondered over, and the methods used to create those special finishing touches can all be filed away for use on your next scale model. One such event is the famous annual Friends show held at Le Fert LA. This show always features a wide variety of incredible aeroplanes, some featuring excellent details, others with less, but as all the models have to be powered by an engine of at least 62cc, they are normally impressive, even if the detail is lacking.
Okay.
The models at Le Fert LA may be slightly daunting for a first scaled project, but they certainly give you something to aspire to. However, in flight, even the aircraft with lesser details are incredibly authentic. The incredible model of a Boeing B-29 Super Fortress is currently the largest model aeroplane in the world. Built to 1/5 scale, it has a wingspan of 29 feet, 8.8 metres, and is 6.2 metres long. Powered by 4 ZDZ 160cc flat 4 petrol engines turning 32 by 10-inch propellers, which provide ample power, it weighs 440 pounds or 200 kilograms. It took 3 years to design and build and carries 24 servos and 10 2000 mAh and 8 1800 mAh batteries. Finished in the markings of 504 Bomb Squadron aircraft with the dynamite nose art, this model can be airborne in only 100 yards and uses 2 pilots and the all-important caller. Using traditional methods of construction incorporating balsa and ply, the B-29 is covered in Dacron and uses fiberglass only for the engine cowls. Exhaust systems are custom made from aluminium tubing. The smoothness of the flying really adds to the scale effect of the model and should be compared to the sequences of other large models on this tape. One unique feature is an onboard telemetry system which relays height, speed and engine temperatures back to the ground crew. The flight pattern of the B-29 is extremely realistic, all the way from the taxiing and holding with the brakes on right through to the smooth landing. Bart Brax used the Balsa USA kit for the basis of this 1/3 scale PT-17 Super Stearman. With a wingspan of 9.5 feet, 2.9 metres, this beautifully finished airplane weighs 27 kilograms, which is 60 pounds. The engine is a 3W flat twin of 120 cc's. Remember, to qualify for an entry at La Ferté, the minimum engine size is 62 cc, and these are described as small.
Un morceau d'étoffe, d'attraper un morceau de foulard, et c'était ça. Regardez les ailerons sur les ailerons, très très nettement. Les ailerons.
Let's look at some ways that we can put some simple detail onto the average scale model. Okay, here we've got a P47D Thunderbolt made from the Refuelling models kit. All bolts from ply construction, Quadra 42 petrol engine up in the front, fiberglass cowl. Covered in glass cloth and epoxy, sprayed with car cellulose based paint. The olive drab anti-dazzle panel on top of the fuselage is painted in enamel, and so are the invasion stripes. Hand painted stars and bars insignia and squadron lettering and codes. Also enamel used to spray on the black stripe tail identification. So you've got the huge fuselage, and we've got to add some detail to make it look less like a toy aeroplane and more like a real scale model. So Phil Clark, who built this model, uses a technique that I use myself a lot, and it's very easy and very simple, quick to do. You get a cheap soldering iron and drill the end of the soldering iron out and put in a small piece of brass tubing, suitably sharpened. Then using a straight edge, you draw out all your panel lines in soft pencil. Then with the soldering iron on a reasonable heat, you can just drop in the soldering iron into the surface of the model at the correct intervals, and it just burns the surface of the paint nicely, and within half an hour you get this excellent flush riveted effect that totally breaks up the lines of the aeroplane and makes it busy. And this is what we're trying to do: make the aeroplane busy, make it real, make it functional. It's used litho plate here, glued down, and then the corners have just been picked off with a bit of sandpaper just to take the edges off, to pick out the edges, and you get the nice metal showing through here. Another technique we use is to use artists' chalk pastels, just ground down on some heavyweight sandpaper, 60 grade sandpaper like this. Artist's chalk, just grind some out and apply it with your fingers, or you can put a little dot like that and just wipe it backwards to make it look like some oil just popped out from one of the rivets and been caught in the slipstream. We wipe it all backwards, same, very faint. You can just see here, if I move it slightly, you can see the exhaust staining here. And it just picks up all the detail, which you can actually feel with your fingers. Phil's used the method for producing the panel lines by using fine lining tape, and you can either leave the lining tape on, or you can peel it or get off afterwards and either have an effect that comes out or effect that appears to be indented in to the aircraft. Using some ProMark dry transfers here for the lettering, thoroughly recommended again. This is an interesting little detail. The panel with the pilot's name, crew chief and the crew's names on it is just a yellow panel, and instead of trying to use a fine paintbrush, he's just used a very sharp felt marker pen for the italic writing, which is a really neat effect. Hand painted, no guts, no glory, and so a couple of kill markings. And once again, all the coming out the intercooler doors, plenty of oil and dirt swept backwards to give the effect. I mean, the aeroplane really looks like it's doing 200 miles an hour, even though it's just sitting here. Another effect is that you've got a silver aeroplane here, but even if it's got camouflage on top of the silver, a bit of sandpaper here to take it back through to the metal finish on the leading edge, breaks up the model. It's just giving that effect to make it look just that little bit different from an average scale model. A further aspect of detailing and finishing is the positioning and concealment of parts of the aeroplane you need to get to, such as a refuelling point on this aircraft. Although the model's upside down at the moment, it's pretty well hidden by this semi-extended cooling gill, and the refuelling point is mounted on a nice strong 1.5mm piece of brass, so it's not going anywhere every time we plug in to refuel. Also, a neat feature on Phil's model is the scale outlet for the exhausts. From the exhaust system, there's tubing welded up and spread, one on this side and one on this side, so the exhaust exits in the scale manner, which is always a nice feature if you can get it. On this particular model of the de Havilland Chipmunk, we can take the canopy off, so we can have a look at the detail that we've put inside. There's no need for a full depth cockpit on a club scale model, because we need to keep things simple and safe. So we've got 8 light ply floors and a half body pilot. This gives a good view when we're looking through the glass area. We can see instrument panel, pilot detail, some nice harnesses, and this little rail I've made up from a bit of litho plate for where the canopy slides back. Turning to the wing of the Chipmunk, we can have a look at a bit of simple detail I've added. 60 grade wet and dry sandpaper glued onto the wing surface with contact adhesive, and with the frame made out of the same material I used for the wing fairing metal cover, although you could use aluminium sticky tape or even card. Just painted up just to show the outline here. On the flap, which is a built up structure on the full size Chipmunk, we use glue blobs covered with a strip of gloss tex again and painted grey, similar to the way we did on the rudder of the aeroplane. Once again, ailerons are the same. Refuelling point on the Chipmunk is where the fuel tanks are set into the wing. There's a little raised panel here with a refuelling cap and a little fuel gauge. Once this has been masked off and sprayed red, and once the paint is dried, we just sand it away a little bit to show a little bit of scuffing and a bit of weathering, just to make it look a bit more authentic. Turning the wing over, we can have a look at the fixed undercarriage. Nice hub here with a little bit of detail just to show the creep marks, which is a nice little easy addition to make. And also we've used working oleos on this particular model, which you can just about see moving here. Nice piece of brake pipe in here, and a little bit of disc, brake disc detail, just to busy it up. Another method we can use for finishing a scale model is to use heat shrink film. Not the plastic gloss film that we'd use on a sport model, but in this case I've used Solar Film's Gloss Tex, which is pre-painted, pre-fuel proofed, and gives a good strong finish, which is good for a club scale model where it's going to be out every Sunday and get quite a battering, and yet stand up to the rigours of scale flying. Although the fuselage on the Chipmunk is made from balsa wood with a small amount of ply, the cowling is a fiberglass moulding, painted with a mixture of car paints and enamels to correspond with the heat shrink covering that I've used. There's a technique using a soldering iron with some brass tubing in the bit to create the riveting, just to breaks up the heat shrink film effect to make it look a little less like a sport model. And the fin strakes here are a good example of it, where you can just about see where I've used the soldering iron, and it just looks like the rivets, which is quite a nice effect, very quick and easy to do. Similarly, we've got them on this piece of plastic card I've used for the cockpit combing, and also on the top of the decking. The wing fairings are covered in a material called metal cover, and this is a self-adhesive sort of metal finish, although you could use litho plate or a self-adhesive metal tape. Once again, we've used this rivet technique just to break it up, and when we paint it and scuff it with a bit of sandpaper, we get quite a realistic weathered effect. On the rudder, We've got simulated rib stitching and the rib tapes, like the full size. It's a built-up structure, and the same on the elevators. The serial codes are just being cut out for some black heat shrink film with a sharp scalpel, and some other little bits of detail and panelling have been added just to break the model up again. But once again, we don't go too mad. It's only a sports scale model, and the point of it is to get it airborne and enjoy it. The great thing about shows like Le Fert LA is that you get a chance to look at the aircraft on the ground as well as in the air. Some of the scale aircraft at this year's show had been finished to a very high standard and drew the attention they deserved. A very important consideration to make when producing scale models is the airflow across the engine, and just as importantly, the airflow out of the cowling. The spinner will have a large impact on airflow, and this may be one area where compromise may have to be reached. Remember that if you suffer an engine failure on a scale model, it may result in a forced landing or even destroy the model, all because the engine cooling wasn't correctly thought through. There are many methods and techniques commonly used by modelers for producing detail. Casting in resin or epoxy is a very accurate method of reproduction. To the advantage of the modeler, new materials such as chemi-woods, Ciba boards and hard foams all have the ability to be machined on lathes, milling machines and drilled, as well as being able to be worked by hand. The lack of grain in these new materials gives absolutely excellent surface finishes, and most of these materials are capable of taking a cellulose coat of paint without the need for special primers. Using sticky metal tape is another popular method with modelers, particularly for producing panel detail. Lithoplate, which you can obtain from your local printer, is also a good material with many uses. The addition of rivets on a model is another great way to improve the authentic finish on your model. There are numerous methods which can be employed, and it's a good idea to practice carefully before deciding on which one is the best for your model. Detail in and around the cockpit area always adds to the look of the model. When reproducing the detail on your plane, first raid the scrap box. Most modelers do not throw anything away, so those odd bits of plastic card, balsa, clear plastic sheet, foam and plastic discs are all useful when producing handles, instrument panels, cockpit rails, radio boxes and a host of other detailing. Some builders go to extra lengths to create that final realistic detail, and this builder has decided to have some fun for the event and add a cargo being unloaded by the ground crew. This Catalina is finished in US Navy World War II markings as used in the Pacific Theatre.
Ce n'est pas une girouette, c'est un Catalina. Et le Catalina, eh bien, on le regarde toujours, vous en verrez d'autres.
It's a shame that the wheels didn't retract, as this really detracts from the scale effect. Compare this flight performance to the B-29 we saw earlier and you can see how smooth and controlled the Super Fortress was. Often this will be the difference between a scale flight and a model aeroplane flying around. Bear this in mind when you're flying your scale model. For example, the climb out after takeoff on a real aircraft is fairly gentle, and a sharp unscale-like manoeuvre will instantly kill any realism.
C'est vrai, c'est une machine, la livrée militaire que nous voyons là, c'est également une machine qui a servi à secourir les pilotes dont les avions ont été endommagés lors de
C'est impeccable, superbe, sur un seul le moteur 3.
This is an unusual subject for a scale model and could hardly be described as a classic aircraft. However, if we all built Spitfires and Mustangs it would be very boring, wouldn't it? The model is powered by 4 62cc petrol engines and uses an all-balsa construction. The full-size aircraft used Rolls-Royce Dart turboprops, and the type was used by many freight airlines as well as BEA, and the RAF even had a batch of 56 aircraft built based on the 100 series variant. Once again, the lack of retracting undercarriage on this model mars the flight, and the turns should be much flatter and more scale-like.
Engine's out. Lost the left engine. Left outer has stopped.
On the turn, you can see what a high aspect ratio wing the Argosy has, and it's hardly an easy option as a scale model.
Bye.
Alors c'est votre
The addition of landing lights and navigation lights on a scale model are really important features and are quite easy to do. On this Hurricane, there's this huge landing light set into the leading edge of the wing, and you can do this by suitably strengthening the wing round the back and then moulding or using a piece of clear plastic with some detail inside it. Really breaks the leading edge of the wing up. Look at this wingtip navigation light. Most aircraft have them, and they are an important and interesting feature to add. And you might be thinking, well, how do I make that part of the aeroplane? But there's an easy way. Once you've finished building the aeroplane, you can cut that part out and use it as a plug to make a moulding for that lamp. Line the inside with litho plate and a small bit of detail here for the landing light, and you've added a quick piece of detail which will really make the difference. This tail light mounted on the rudder of this 1930s Avro Tutor is an interesting bit of detail. Quite simple to make. It's just a Bakelite fairing with a lens which you can make up out of balsa or plastic, and it's just mounted straight into the back of the rudder with a patch of doped fabric here and a small fairing. Quite crude, but an easy piece of detail to make all the difference on a scale model. Amongst the planes in the collection are flying replicas of the Bristol box kite and the Avro triplane. These are the aircraft actually used in the film, those magnificent men in their flying machines. Just looking at the flimsy construction of these aeroplanes really makes you admire those pioneer aviators. The addition of small but important details on a model are quite easy to do. These cockpit entry steps can be made by using a piece of card or a bit of litho plate and cutting the fabric to suit, adding a little piece of balsa wood or litho plate in here. Fasteners can be easily made up from scrap, and these panel fasteners can also be added in with these strengthening pieces. This 1912 Blackburn was bought by Richard Shuttleworth in the mid-30s. It is now thought to be the oldest airworthy British plane in the world. HUD detail on a scale model is a nice addition. On the Avro Tutor, you've got this slightly domed cover, which you can make out from the bottom of a plastic or metal can, and don't forget to have the little cutout here for the valve. The Shuttleworth Collection also houses its own workshops that are responsible for both restoration of new aircraft and maintenance of all the planes and vehicles in the collection. Many of the aircraft need extensive maintenance after only relatively few hours of flight. The emphasis is very much on the fact that they do all fly, and this is detectable in the atmosphere of the hangars as you walk around. This is a working hangar, rather than a static museum of relics. Exhaust detail is an interesting one. Getting the shape and size exactly right really adds to the aeroplane. There's nearly always a built-up area on the back of each of these exhaust stubs, and this can be made from card, blobs of glue, and it really adds to the effectiveness of the scale fidelity of the model. This unique flying example of the German First World War LVG C.VI bomber and light reconnaissance aircraft, housed here at the Shuttleworth Collection, embodies many of the features that you'd want to put on a scale model of this type. Obviously not for the beginner, but there are many details and fine points that we can study in this video to help you make that particular masterpiece scale model. The aircraft uses a plywood covered fuselage, fabric covered wings and tail surfaces, metal cowlings at the front here with an exposed engine sitting on top of it, radiator detail, and this superb and unique lozenge camouflage are all items that you'd want to embody in your model. The wing structure and finishing on an aircraft of the 1418 war period has loads of details that we can incorporate in our scale model. Rigging detail, strut detail and fixings, and notice that although the camouflage lozenge pattern is part of the fabric on here, each individual rib tape is just plain strip colour. The LVG first appeared in 1917 and was produced in numerous variants and in quite high numbers for the time, taking into consideration that the whole German Air Force consisted of only a few hundred aircraft at the beginning of the First World War. Careful study of the detail of the model you're building is very important. On this particular aircraft, the size and positioning of the national markings, and in this case the hand-painted serial number, are important to get right for that extra scale effect. The LVG was equipped with two weapons, a forward-firing machine gun that fired through the propeller arc and a second machine gun mounted on a ring in the rear cockpit. Seen on many of the German aircraft of this period is the very prominent six-cylinder engine with its upright exhaust system. This low revving power unit ensured that the aircraft was very steady in the air, making it a good long-range bomber or reconnaissance platform. However, the response and manoeuvrability could be described at best as heavy. These sluggish flight characteristics made the LVG a favourite target of the Allied fighter pilots. The LVG C.VI was the first aeroplane to make a daylight bombing raid over London. Previously, such raids had only been possible using Zeppelins. The C.VI version, housed at Shuttleworth, is in fact on long-term loan to the collection. It is thought to have been built from 3 different airframes captured after the 1418 war. Let's have a close look at the undercarriage system on the LVG. On a model, we'll have wire undercarriage fitting up into the fuselage and being held in place. But we can add metal fittings here and detail on the outside to add to the scale fidelity. Obviously we can have balsa cladding wrapped in a covering material or even made from a metal wrap. And the undercarriage system we can also simulate and use bungee as on the full size, and these interesting Bowden cables here to stop the undercarriage pulling out of place. Following acquisition in 1966, it was restored back to flying condition and is regularly displayed at the many flying days held at Old Warden throughout the year. Okay, let's go into the workshop now and have a look at a World War I model using a lot of the construction techniques that we've looked at on the full-size aircraft. This beautiful scale model of German First World War Albatross DVA biplane, made by Brian Thorne, embodies a lot of the details and ideas for finishing and detailing. Because it had an upright exposed engine, there's no way around producing a lot of detail here, and so Brian's made this up mostly from bits and pieces from the scrap box, balsa and ply, and also produced a beautiful pair of machine guns, air-cooled machine guns here. Cowl from lithoplate metal, tin bashed into shape, and the fuselage over the normal balsa wood structure has then had all the wooden plywood panels of the full size simulated from Mirrorlight 1/64th ply, and then given several coats of varnish and polished. Beautiful metal fittings here with small screws add to the detail, and as you can see here, all painted up in green to stand out, including these lovely cooling vents. And a beautiful feature here is the glow plug point, which the door opens, and you can see here plug in for the remote point for your glow plug. It's powered by an Enya 120 4-stroke engine with a slightly underscale spinner to allow some air to come in to cool the engine, because at the end of the day it might be, if it's dead scale but the engine overheats, it's no good for anybody. If you look at the undercarriage, you can see this is made from wire and covered in metal tubing, and works as per the full size with bungee straps. The wheels are made up from basic plastic trolley wheels, but are wrapped with rubber to give the right effect. And as you can see, you get scale springing as well. Stub wings here for the bottom wings to plug into on the tube and wire system, and the top wing as one piece fits on top of the cabane struts, which once again are made up from strong metal. There's a lot of detail in the cockpit we'll have a look at in a minute. Nice pilot, and some beautiful hand painting on here, including the Albatross logo here. Closed loop systems, as per the full size, operate the control surfaces, and even little wire handholds for the ground crew to handle the full-size aircraft have been reproduced. Scale springing on the underneath for the tail skid, and the details here hand painted on for the specifications of the aircraft for weights and overloading. There's plenty of detail inside the cockpit as well as outside the model, with a working gun cocking lever that actually moves and switches on the radio, and lots of other fixtures and fittings with metal work and lathe work combined to produce the small number of instruments that was carried on the Albatross, plus a few other knobs, dials and switches that represent the flying controls of the time. Everything inside is all beautifully varnished and finished off with this nice cockpit combing from a piece of scrap leather. Turning our attention to the top wing of the Albatross, we see some rather nice radiator detail here made up from aluminium tube and lithoplate, and also the wing rib tapes on each rib, and also strengthening tapes around the leading edge and the periphery of the whole of the wing. Aileron hinges as per the full size from metal straps which wrap around the aluminium leading edge, tube leading edge on the full size. The trailing edge is made from ply, and on the full size it was made from tube, and the shrinking dope would pull the tube out of shape to give the scalloped effect, which we've cut into the shape of the trailing edge. Turning it over, you can see the radiator detail here, which comes off to get to the aileron servo, and even the radiator operating handle is modelled on this aeroplane. Full-size under camber, which you can see from this shot, gives excellent and very pleasing flying characteristics. Hand-painted Harken cruise markings, and this interesting green and purple two-tone. Let's look at putting some detail onto a wing covered with glass cloth and epoxy. This is the Chiltern Sea Fury 73-inch span model, covered in glass cloth and epoxy, sanded down to the finish that we're happy with. And to get this weathered finish, what I did was I sprayed with silver car paints, cellulose-based car paints, and sanded it off with 1000 grade sandpaper, used wet, just to take the edge and smooth off the silver. Then I sprayed it with the camouflage colours, in this case dark sea grey and the Korean War theatre markings of black and white stripes. Then I took a straight edge and, using 3-view drawings, cut all the panel lines very lightly into the surface. And then, using soldering iron with a piece of brass tubing mounted in the end, just put the rivet detail on just by burning the paint very slightly. Dark artist pastels just for the cordite stains from the Canon muzzles, and then also some weathering here and there just to darken the edges of some of the panels. The main panels used on this aircraft that would get the most use would be the gun access doors for the ammunition, which is this one, and this one, with the blisters covering the magazine drums. So, with a bit of working at the paint with some sandpaper, you can chip the paint off in the correct areas, and you get this lovely weathered effect. So it looks like all the paint's been chipped off, which gives a good combat worn effect to this wing. Here's another unusual subject which has given the builder quite a few headaches. This aircraft is a Herald Dubois HD-34, a type which dates from the 1950s. Like the Argosy, the HD-43 uses a high aspect ratio wing, creating low drag. Its general arrangement and narrow chord wing resulted in an order from the French Institut Géographique National. It differed from their original version by having an extended nose to accommodate the photographer's position. Once again, we see a fairly lively flight, which reduces the scale effect. The landing just about qualifies as one, but it lives to fly another day. This pair of Grumman F-3F US naval fighters show how much fun can be had from flying two similar models together. The retract system on this model involves the wheels retracting upwards and inwards into the fuselage side, and was a feature of Grumman aircraft such as the F-4F Wildcat, which was so successful during the Pacific Sea battles during World War II. These two excellent models were built by Ludwig Faber and Günther Werthmeier from Germany. Built to 1/3 scale and powered by Mace 200cc petrol engines, these scratch-built models weighed 37 kilograms or 81 pounds and flew together to the delight of the crowd. If you try it sometime, you'll see how difficult it is to put two models in the same piece of sky. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. I hope you've enjoyed our look at scale, detailing and finishing, and look forward to talking to you next time. Cheers.